was very active. She was really one of the key leaders of the civil rights movement here in the 1960s. And she wound up going to jail one time after another, to the point that by her door, on what is now called Twine Street here in Lincolnville, she had a bag packed up, ready to go, because the conditions at the jail, where they would put civil rights persons that they arrested for civil rights, was not inside. And this was July. It was a stockade, chain link fence area outside, hot as it could be. So Catherine Twine wore a great big hat. You'll see the button on the top of the hat is from the march in Washington, where Dr. King gave his famous speech. So that button is still on that hat, and that hat is in the Lincolnville Museum.
Amen.
The reason why I chose this illustration, because it comes with the next stories that are coming up here, is both because of her being put in jail repeatedly, and also because of her absolute preparation and persistence. No matter what happens, we're going to overcome. No matter what happens, we're going to find ways to help people overcome the barriers when they are released out of jail or prison, so that they can successfully become citizens and family persons and make real contributions to their lives and vote. Oh, and I'm Warren Clark, and I've been with Compassion St. Augustine for about 9.5 years, doing different things, and right now I lead something with Irvin Bullock called Good Trouble St. John's, and that is how John Lewis is teaching for us about good trouble, getting yourself into good trouble. It is an advocacy group that is focused on how do we lift up different ways of our being together in this community or as a state or as a nation that are much more compassionate, and how do we effectively advocate for that.
I'm Jim Vandenberg. I've been with Compassion St. Augustine since its beginning. I want to share one little tidbit. In the very beginning, at absolutely every town council meeting, we had somebody get up and speak about Compassion St. Augustine. And that happened for a year and a half. And you would not believe the degree to which the commissioners began to talk about compassion in terms of their business and what they were doing. It became an automatic kind of thing for them, and that was really pretty exciting. And there was one woman who, God bless her, I hope she's still alive today, she had no good to say about any commissioner on that town council. She was never going to have that, so you might have. But the town manager decided that he would take her to breakfast, and did. And I guess it was a pretty long breakfast. He accomplished very little in the breakfast other than really taking all of the elements of compassion, respect, and all of the others, and treated her to breakfast and to the way one could really engage in relationship. And she never really changed very much within the town council meetings, but she liked the town manager. I thought it was wonderful. I mean, that tells you what you really can do if you decide you're going to try to express yourself passionately, and in that process know what you're doing. I want to pick up on what was said earlier, both in terms of Nancy's work with Compassion in Action, which dealt with prison and with prison reform possibilities, and with the St. John's Youth Academy. And out of that entire effort we began to have conversations with Operation New Hope in Jacksonville. Operation New Hope began 20-some years ago, in 1999 actually, and we tried to talk with them about the possibility of getting St. John's Academy folk, when they graduated from St. John's Academy, to become part of that so they could get the kind of skills they needed to re-enter society. Because that's tough for anybody, but it's really tough for teenage young men. And so we really worked through that whole process. We got Operation New Hope to agree to it, and the result was not only to that, but also to deal with felons who had completed their sentence. And the only thing that they could not be part of our program if they were involved sexually or in terms of murder. But other than that, most of the felons who came out of prison during that times were there for drug abuse of one kind or another. So the result was we started this whole program. We were told that if we came up with 1 year of funding for the program, we could start the program here in St. Augustine, right up the street, about 5 blocks. And that in addition to that, they would help us carry through, because they had that program in Jacksonville for 20 years. And it was very successful in Jacksonville, still is. So we did that, and we raised, within 9 months, we raised $250,000 from community groups here in St. Augustine. And that's the other thing I want to tell you. There were 2 of us who did that money raising. It was hard for me to imagine that we were going to get that kind of funding. And we had gotten it before, but an obelisk is one thing. A felon just out of prison is another thing. It was every bit as easy to get funds from the local community for felons who we were trying to help re-enter society as it had been to celebrate the 450th anniversary. Now think about that. I mean, that's really pretty phenomenal. We raised $250,000, and the first week of March, we opened right opposite St. Francis House, the homeless shelter here, and within 1 week, we had to close because of the pandemic. And as a result of that, the $250,000 quickly was spent, not here in St. Augustine or in St. Johns County, but back in Jacksonville, just simply because we were not set up at that. We were set up to move, but we were not in a position to be able to open our setting here and to go forward. So the result is we are where we were in March of 2020. And some of us, are really hoping that we can turn that around and start again. Because that program, I could spend all kinds of time telling you about the program. It is a phenomenal program. It sells itself. There's just nothing you really have to do to sell it. And the people who participate in the program are different after it's all over than they ever were before. So I hope that some of you, as we go along, may be in a position to help us get a new beginning. Thank you.
Thank you. The story that Jim shares about Operation New Hope actually ties exactly to my story. Another story about how I saw compassion in action. But Operation New Hope actually benefited members of my family. I have a family member he's working at a sanitation company. He's now a supervisor. His life has changed, not only because he's a guy of faith, but because he had a system to back him. He lives in Jacksonville, you know. So this is very important that we have it here in St. Johns County, because I think some of the headlines that we share throughout the audience will come to reality with that type of framework here. So mine is actually the day that it was Nelson Mandela, the launch of Nelson Mandela's adoption, the day of Nelson Mandela Day adoption by the city of St. Augustine. And no offense to the county, but the city of St. Augustine is very progressive. I mean, just having, and I think we need to push to have the compassionate orators or storytellers start each city council meeting, and maybe do the same thing at the county. Because I think we've lost compassion in our community, and it's adults, it's not kids. I've even been to, and sorry, this is a sidebar, but I've been to school board meetings where kids are so respectful and adults are the ones creating the fuss. And for me, it's like, well, we tell them to have an open mindset, to open with curiosity or have curiosity, ask questions and respect people's answers, but we don't do it, we don't model it. So I think we probably need to push to get those things back on the agenda. So maybe we'll talk about that, Arthur. All right, so mine was Nelson Mandela's Day. For me, I read about Nelson Mandela. I knew his story, but I never knew that like his daughter and his wife coming here to launch this and launch Operation New Hope was like going to be a real thing. And I told you, Karen is a dreamer. Everybody in Compassion St. Augustine are dreamers, and they are really grassroots. And it came to life. And you know, I got to take a picture with his daughter. I got to experience that whole event. Reverend Rawls had something down at the church, a big launch event of the facility. And like I said, I know the evidence of how it works, of how Operation New Hope works, because I had a cousin that went through it, and a sibling that went through it. And it helped their lives, you know, so I really appreciated that. It's really that big, you know, to bring somebody from a different country over here to celebrate with us and to adopt Nelson Mandela Day. That's huge St. Augustine has been progressive since the start, as we saw in the videos, but it's taken some windy roads throughout that time. And now I think it's time for us to get back out front and being a progressive city. So I think that's what 5 years from now looks like. But that was my compassionate moment, my second compassionate moment, and I really appreciated being a part of it. All right, so lastly, that should have been you next, Warren, right? All right. So we have a Mandela video to show, and I think we'll take a couple questions, and Arthur will close us. And take a couple questions.